All right, welcome to episode 57 of the At Bat podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news, as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez. This week, I'm joined by Gabriel Wilkins, who, of course, you can see on War Media's Open Run podcast. And, this week is basically like an all-star recap, going into what happened over the last week or so in baseball, which, of course, we're in the all-star break right now, recording on Thursday, July 13th. But how we doing, Gabe? How'd you enjoy the all-star festivities, man?
I'm doing well. I thought the All-Star festivities were fun. I think it's been it was a nice cap off to the first half of the season. A game that went down to the wire, even though the National League stole the game and is a fan of an American League ball club. I like seeing the American League maintain any stretch of dominance that they can, especially, after knowing from legends of old or hearing from, past how much the National League used to dominate it. But
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless, it was a hell of a game and a game that came down to the end and has really been an incredible shown just how incredible the 2023 season has been if you include the first half of the season on top of the way the season began with the World Baseball Classic and that thriller between Japan and USA in the team in the final. So I'm excited to see what the second half has to bring.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think, and we'll get into the All-Star game, delve into. We'll start it mostly by going into the home run derby that was on Monday, and kind of get into that. But yeah, the All-Star game was. I think both events were just as good, and the seeing the All-Star game and getting that finally seeing the NL get a win after for the first time since 2012 when we were in high school, Gabe. So right,
I
I
was
believe
freshman year of college.
yeah, freshman year in college. My bad, I
Yeah.
forget. But yeah, no, I mean, I was still in high school, just seeing that. That's ridiculous. That's the last time they won. But you are right though that at the same time that and National League guys shouldn't really be complaining because they dominated for so long, back in the day. So it's kind of like we're just in that stretch where the American League's dominating. It's just the way it is. But yeah, we'll get into that and we'll talk more of the All-Star game. But we'll start off with the Home Run Derby, which of course, especially here in Chicago, was headlined by the fact that Luis Robert, number one seed, and man, we'll just start from the beginning, straight up the first round. I mean that was fun. I think probably the first round might have been the best part of the whole home run derby. I feel like for a lot of reasons, but for that particular round when it came to that one seeded Robert Jr. and Adley Rutschman, like what were your feelings on that, man? I know Adley, of course, he had a big round at 27. 7 of those I think came when he switched over to the right side, and that extra 30 that he had, right? So, or I think it was like I don't know if it was a minute. Was it a minute or 30? I forgot if he had a total of a minute or whatever. But the fact that he switched over was so badass. But I honestly thought I was like, man, Robert. I'm not saying I was doubting Robert because the dude, like from the beginning, I've been saying Robert's got a great stance for the home run derby, but man, when Edley was pounding those bombs in the extra 30 seconds that he had, that was crazy. But anyways, how did you feel about that round with Edley and then having Robert come in and come back smoothly? He didn't even need that extra 30 or that extra minute. He just went out there and hit one bomb and it was over. He broke the tie and what moved on.
Well, initially, just watching it in live time, I was like, man, Lou got his work cut out for him because Adley Rushman almost made me look like an idiot for coming on here and saying last week that he didn't stand a chance against Luis Robert. And he definitely put on a majestic display, what he was able to do, not only from the left side, but switching over to the right side. I was like, man, I don't know how you top that. And had his father, throwing the ball to him, and they had a cool father-son moment that I'm sure they'll never forget. Is that marked Adley's first appearance on the All-Star stage and on the home run derby stage, and he definitely put on an impressive showing. But I felt like once Lou started getting hot and he got halfway to that total of 27, as long as Luis Sierra, the batting practice instructor for the White Sox and the bullpen catcher, was keeping the
Mm-hmm.
ball up, I felt like he had a chance. The one thing that makes Luis Robert Jr. so special, as I've talked about many times before, is that he make the game look easy. And we see it so much on the defensive side of the ball, but we take it for granted on the offensive side what he's able to do sometimes, man, and being able to just pimp home runs 440 feet, and beyond on multiple occasions, hitting the longest home run in the history of that ballpark at like over 480 feet. That was impressive. So once I saw him starting to get in his rhythm a little bit, I was, I got excited. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, he got a chance. And then once he tied it up, knowing that he had that a bonus time, I was like, man, all you got to do is just hit one. Just hit one. You know, he made it very easy on himself, and
Mm-hmm.
he bounced back mightily strong. And I was glad to see that, because it was sure as hell looking like it was about to be a first round upset. And I think that would have been by far the biggest first round
Oh
upset
yeah.
had it went down. But yeah, that first round was competitive. And what Julio Rodriguez did to follow it, man, hitting 40 plus home runs in round one, man, he was definitely feeding off that home crowd. Shout out to his guy that was throwing the balls to him, man, because he was keeping it up just like he liked it every single time.
Mm-hmm.
He was firing them away. So the Stars put on the show, and round one definitely did not disappoint.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing with and I kind of mentioned it a little bit last week that a guy like Luis Robert and a guy like Adolis Garcia, they have perfect swings for the, and obviously Rosarena proved it that he had a perfect swing for it too. But the like that swing of just having straight ropes to left works out in the home run derby because they got out quick and it's kind of like a short and sweet type swing, and it worked out for them in the first round for sure. And yeah, you mentioned the pitching was actually a big part of the conversation in that home run derby because of the fact that you had guys like Alonso, guys like Adolis Garcia, who like you could argue like they got cheated. Like like respect to Rosarena and Julio Rodriguez, but man, like Alonso especially, like that dude was throwing down and away, like and throwing like looking like was throwing sliders out there. So that was rough, and what yeah, what'd you think about that? And like some of the pitching that was out there that day. It's not easy. Obviously, nothing's easy, but I mean, look at the guy that Julio Rodriguez had thrown in. I mean, that dude was throwing just as you said, just straight cookies down the middle where he likes it.
Well, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think we as fans sometimes have a bad habit of not being able to put things into full account of perspective. And when you in an event like that, where you have a 2-minute clock and you got to keep pitching and pitching and pitching, and you can't stop, that's hard.
Hmm.
And these guys only have a limited amount of time to practice for it. Most of these guys aren't submitting their name to participate in this event until like a week before, or
Hmm.
sometimes a week and a half before the home run derby actually happens. And when you taking BP, with your teammates and whatnot, you focusing largely on the game.
Hmm.
In order to do an event like this, it requires not only game practice, but like practice like according to the rounds and how the situation is set up and goes. So,
Hmm.
and it's only a limited amount of time that you have to do it. So I give a lot of kudos to those guys. Yeah, you know, Pete Alonso's pitcher for the home run derby, his batting practice, like he wasn't the best, but then again, he's had the pleasure of winning twice in his career. Adolis Garcia, even though it's his first time, he still was able to come out there and put on a show for the fans, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, for those that want to criticize, man, I get it. Put yourself in that situation, because when you gotta go nonstop 2 minutes straight, you know, if you ain't, if that's a survival of the fittest. And then you even saw some of the batters getting tired.
Hmm.
Like Adley, as much as he was putting on the show in round one, he was very tired towards the end. Because he was putting his all into those swings. Vlad Guerrero Jr. same waiting in the final round. So it happens.
Yeah, you're right, and I mean, also another thing too that I think nobody really took into account is that I think Pete Alonso could have had anybody thrown out there and he wasn't going to get 41.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, I
Like,
agree with you on that, because once Julio got that 41, I was with my friend watching the festivities,
uh,
and I was like, yeah, look, it's over. I know he's a
yeah,
two-time champ, but like it's bad when you get 41 in round one, because even if he put on a show where he got 30 or 35, it just wasn't gonna be enough.
yeah, yeah, and just looking at that matchup, and yeah, Lourdes Garcia definitely did a lot better for sure, and than him than like a lot of people expected with that type of pitching. But you're right, it is tough, and people don't take that into account. But another thing in the first round, I gotta take I gotta have accountability on myself here. Last week I said Mookie Betts was gonna win it, and I'm here to say I was so wrong.
Hey, it happens,
I
man.
should.
It happens. I mean, sometimes you want to go with the wild card, the guy that nobody really expects to take home the trophy and the hardware. But yeah, I mean, going up against Vlad, I had Vlad in round one, but I saw where you was going with it. If it had worked out in your favor, you would have been looking like a genius. But hey,
No,
everybody get a turn, right?
yeah, you're right, dude. But Mookie didn't even care. You like, you know what I mean? Like, it just looked like he didn't care. I get that Vlad like had a great round, 26. I get it, but like, man, Mookie looked like like, and rightfully so. I think he didn't want to be in it. He was saying that his wife kind of pushed him to do it. Fair enough, right? But it looked like he was just chilling. He didn't even take that. I mean, he's got great cardio, anyways. They were saying, but like, he looked like he didn't want to take that time out. Didn't take it, and he just had 11 homers. And I was like, man, I expected way more out of Mookie. At least get to 20. But no, it didn't work out. But you're right. I mean, it is what it is. I think he was definitely an underdog, and I was just hoping he put up better on display. But it is what it is. Somebody said too. He's like, he saves it for the big games. And that's, some of those guys are like that, right? Even, and because a lot of people were like, oh, just pull it. You got to pull the ball. And Mookie, like, even said, you caught it on the mic. He was like, I can't do that. I can't, like on command, he can't do that. And I think it just goes to show like how hard the game of baseball is. We always have to remind ourselves, because a lot of these guys, or a lot of people you watch on TV, you're like, oh, this guy's pulling the ball. He means to do that. Some of these guys don't. They just hit the ball
It's
wherever the
very
ball
true.
goes. So yeah, it just goes to show. But yeah, I just had to say that because it was very disappointing. I was like, man, I even like was telling my buddies, I'm like, watch out, Mookie Betts gonna surprise some people. And it didn't work out. But anyways, moving on to the second round, obviously Luis Robert moved on with his 28 bombs over Adley. And then Rosarena, who like surprised a lot of people, not only winning the first round, but winning the second round over Luis Robert. But what did you think about both performances? I think, Rosarena had 35, so it was really tough for Luis Robert. But I think we saw how tired he was getting, I think, there. And another thing, too, on the negative side of this whole thing, of course, as we found out later on, he had calf stiffness. And I'm not 100% sure if they said, I feel like I haven't really heard clearly, maybe you have, of like whether it was because of the home run derby or was it before the home run derby?
Well, they said it happened during the home run derby,
Okay, it
but
was
they
okay.
said he felt good enough to finish. And as a result of suffering a calf injury, as we know, he had to end
Mhm.
up missing the All-Star
Yeah.
game and whatnot. But he was able to walk the red carpet, and then he issued out a text message, I believe, that Lamont Pope of Chicago Sun-Times, who covers the White Sox and Chicago baseball here in the city, said like he was 100%, he would be 100% healthy and ready to go in time for the White Sox first game out of the All-Star break on Friday evening against Atlanta. So we'll see what happens. I mean, if he's in the lineup, you can assume he's good to go. If not, then he's maybe gonna need, a couple days to get back right or whatever. We'll see. But that's how he suffered the injury. But getting back to your point on the battle and the showdown between Arozarena and Luis Robert Jr. I mean, Randy Arozarena, man, he just liked the big stage. And I never counted Randy Arozarena out, because to me, the three or the two toughest matchups in round one coming in, I felt like was going to be Arozarena and Garcia, and Alonso and Rodriguez. And with Arozarena being able to get through Adolis Garcia, I just knew, Luis Robert versus Randy Arozarena, like that could go either way. Like, even though Luis escaped Adley, I knew that could go either way. But when I saw him put the show that he put on in the semifinals, I was like, 35 is gonna be a tough number to beat.
Mhm.
I was hoping that he kept it, around like 30 to 32
Mhm.
once he got up there. But when he took advantage of that bonus time and elevated it up to 35, I was like, that's gonna be tough. But I thought Luis put on a good show. I think that's when Luis Sierra started getting a little bit tired, and he started leaving some pitches down. And maybe that's how the injury did occur, when you're trying to strain and get low and drive a ball up, as
Mhm.
opposed to keeping it, chest high, whatever like that. But yeah, I mean, Randy Arozarena just doing what he do best, man. He just like the big stage, and he put on a grand show. And I believe he was the first Rays player to ever advance to the finals in the home run derby. So kudos to him on that.
Yeah, he is, and yeah, it was cool to see from that. And I mean, I'm not. Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm definitely. I think push comes to shove, I might have just picked the Dollies, but like I still feel like I was like, man, I got to give Randy a shot, and he just showed why. Because his line drive power is crazy, especially for this event, as we mentioned with Robert and Garcia. But yeah, that was cool to see, and hopefully again everything turns out well for Luis Robert. Hopefully it's nothing too long. But that's just another thing, man, with this home run derby, why a lot of guys don't want to do it, and why a lot of guys wait till the very end if they're going to decide on whether they're going to do it, because it is in a lot of ways it strains your body in so many different ways, like, and to to be prepared for the not only the aftermath and so many things go into it. So hopefully it doesn't scare guys from getting into it, and I'm sure it has, but hopefully for next year it doesn't. On the other side, Julio Rodriguez lost to Vlad Guerrero Jr. It kind of just looked like Julio kind of like ran out of like gas, right? I mean, after that, I mean, which fair, right? Because we've seen what those first rounds do to guys, right? When it comes to like, I mean, going as far back as like Josh Hamilton, right? When he hit those 36, I believe, right in the first round, he was kind of
Mhm.
gassed. He didn't end up winning, or no ended up winning that home run derby. So it did really, yeah, it really just looked like he ran out of gas there. And Vlad Guerrero Jr., rightfully so, made it to the final and eventually beat Rosarina in the final. But what were your thoughts on that round with Vladdy and Julio?
I mean, you summed it up perfectly as
Mhm,
far as I'm concerned. I thought Julio got tired, and that was something that I was concerned about after he hit those 41 home runs in round one. This is a battle of attrition, and anytime it's not like it used to be back in the day where you have 10 outs
mhm,
and you could kind of like be selective of what pitches you want to hit. It's not like that anymore. So when you got, these pitches coming at you rapid fire, man, like it take a lot to just keep swinging. Like you can't let balls just pass, because if you do, you wasting time. And you only got one time out in between those 2 minutes, and then you trying to get is at least a minute worth of bonus time. And in order to get that, you got to hit two bombs of 440 feet or greater. So,
mhm.
I mean, Julio put on a great show, but Vlad, I think, was able to take advantage of that. And as a result, he moved on to the final round.
Yeah, no, yeah, and like I said, rightfully so, Vlad Guerrero Jr. I mean, look, he's the first now, as as I said, he beat Randy Rosarena. They're the first duo of father and son, of course, with his dad Vladimir Guerrero. That's cool to see. It was one of those things where you knew it was going to happen sometime with Vlad, because yeah, I mean, he's just a beast. And so it was good to see, and like I said, great event for the home run derby once again. I do want to, one of the things I did see on social media a little bit were some of the conversations of like, oh, like, guys taking a little bit more time on their timeouts than others. And, maybe the pace is a little off now. It's one of those things where, when something happens, like, the first, this has been going on for 7 or 6 years or whatever, this format. But when it first started, of course, everybody was like, Frazier went off and everybody was like obsessed with this style. And I still like the style, to be honest, but I saw plenty of people complaining about it and saying that maybe there's something that should be changed, something they whether it be, adding some, free swings, because obviously a lot of guys get gassed and we don't get to see like the same style of swings. We don't get to see like bombs like consistently. Like, I feel like we only saw, maybe, I think Luis Roberts still hit was he the one that hit the farthest one still, or did
Yeah,
Vlad break the?
he
'Cause yeah,
definitely
480, right?
he hit
480.
like the top five furthest home runs on the
Yeah.
Derby period, because he was
Yeah.
hitting a lot of bombs, like I said, over
Mhm.
440 feet or greater,
Yeah.
like in the first round and in the second round. So
Yeah.
he really put on a majestic showing, and he hit 50 home runs, I believe,
Mhm.
total through
Mhm.
the first round and the semifinal round, which would make his total like the most ever in White Sox history in a home run derby, even though he didn't win. So, in my eyes, Luis Robert Jr. put on an incredible performance, and he was doing it with an effortless swing,
Mhm.
which I hope that the fans at home were able to appreciate. Because if you look at the way that Vlad Guerrero Jr. was putting his whole body in the swings, and Pete Alonso and Adley Rushman, to be able to do it as easy and fluidly as Luis Robert Jr. does it, man, everybody can't do that.
Yep. No, yeah, it was easy popping. I mean, as Chicagoans, we know, but you could tell a lot of people were surprised because they don't watch any Sox games or whatever. They're not familiar. It was cool to see Lee Strasburg kind of, get on that big stage. But yeah, but ultimately on like with any changes, do you believe there should be any changes? If so, what kind of things could they add? Because like I said, a lot of people were saying maybe get some, get like, if you get a certain amount of home runs or whatever, you get an extra 3 outs, but without the clock.
Well, that's a good question. So I haven't
Mm,
really gotten a chance to think about that.
mm,
I like this new format. I like the fact that they don't have to worry about outs
mm,
because back when we was coming up as kids, you only
mm,
had 10 outs, and you had to be very selective about what you swung at, and you be there all night sometimes
yep.
because if a guy wasn't getting the pitches where he wanted, he
Mm,
would literally be talking to his dude, throwing the pitches like, "Hey man, like keep it up," or whatever like that.
yep.
Whereas now it's more faster, but sometimes I feel like 2 minutes just not enough.
Mm,
Maybe we need to give these guys like 3 or 4 minutes. And
mm,
maybe if they hit like 4 home runs or more that go further than 440 feet, instead of giving them, a minute long bonus, let's give them a 2 minute bonus
mm,
to work with. I think that just gives more suspense to the viewers at home and whatnot like that, because you can tell when guys are tiring out,
mm.
and sometimes that clock can work in a guy's favor, whether he's up at the plate or whether he's waiting to get his round in. Because like when I looked at Adley Rushman towards the end, I was like, man, thank God he's getting tired. It's
Mm.
somebody that was root for Luis Robert Jr. because if he'd have had like an extra minute and a half, man, he could have kept going.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think it's one of those things too where I think we got also have to think about the formats. You don't want to go too you don't want to get too close to what it used to be, right? Because we're at a spot where it's like so nice, right? Because I feel like a lot of people were talking about like, oh, like they should have like 5 swings or whatever, or 5 or 7
No,
swings, and it's like, well, that's kind of like the old format. And also, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, the fact that you could be there forever, and you're right because there was guys I remember back in the day who would literally take 5 or 6 pitches, and like that's a lot of time for not see a home run, especially like people on TV, people there, whatever. So yeah, it's a fine line. I think it's in a great spot, but yes, I'm sure there's always going to be changes. I'm sure in the future there will be changes to it. I don't know if it's imminent or whatever, but um, yeah, I mean it is interesting because everything after everything eventually starts not necessarily. I wouldn't say dull, but a lot of things, get to a certain point, people start criticizing it. It's just the way it is. So it's interesting to me. But from the All-Star game perspective, of course, on Tuesday, the National League, as you said, National League finally came out on top for the first time since 2012, with a 3-2 win. And it was a great game. It was a classic All-Star game where it was all about pitching and about that clutch hit. And man, from growing up, honestly, and seeing uh you know, the NL getting devastated by, say, a Michael Young eighth inning hit in '06. It was great to see a guy like Elias Diaz hit a 2-run bomb late in the game. But from the Chicago perspective, of course, we didn't get to see Luis Robert, unfortunately, in the game. The only Chicago representative, of course, was Justin Steele. He was able to pitch a scoreless inning there, and that was cool to see as well. He struck out Rooker as well on a nasty slider, so that was pretty awesome. But what were your overall thoughts on the game? Like I said, it was a great game, and I think it's just we've seen plenty of these close, where like goes down to the last pitch, and this one did, and of course it came down to Julio versus Kimbrel at one point, and Julio walked, which to be honest, as a fan, as in a game that doesn't matter, I thought was kind of lame. I thought he should have swung at that. That's just me. You know what I mean? I get he's trying to win, but I was like, man, if Julio would have just swung, even if he pops out, I wouldn't be mad because like it was still a great moment. At least he finished it, but I get it. He was, trying to win the game at all costs. Of course, Jose Ramirez struck out as the next batter. But what were your overall thoughts in the game, man, in general?
it was a well played game, and
Mm,
if you're a fan that likes pitching and you like good defense, this was your type of game. It just came down to a simple mistake. Felix Bautista left a splitter low and
mm-hmm.
away, and Elias Diaz pounced on it. And that was really the difference in the game, is that hit alone. And I got to give credit to Luis Ariz, though, for
Oh
putting him
yeah.
in a position. because National League offense was kind of held relatively in check for the most
Mm-hmm.
part. But Luis Arraez going 2 for 2 early and
Yep.
causing havoc on the base pass, man. He could have had a case for MVP if the National League got that lead a little bit earlier. But Elias Diaz doing what he did, it's a hell of a story. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a guy who's 32 years old. It's his first time in an All-Star game and taking advantage of his opportunity, seizing a moment for a Colorado Rockies organization that hasn't done too well on the field through the first half of the season, but nonetheless can now say that they have an All-Star game MVP for the first time in franchise history. And it's amazing when you consider the fact that this was a guy who had been let go or waived by the Pittsburgh
Mm-hmm.
Pirates back in 2020, and for the majority of his career served as a backup catcher. So it just goes to show and serve as a testimony to the young baseball players watching at home that just because you know you may be down and out one day doesn't mean that you can't rise back up the next day and do things on a big stage and be rewarded for it. So kudos to him because it was a hell of a hit and he stayed ready for his moment and his opportunity when his number was called. And now he delivered the senior circuit, their first, you know, all-star victory in almost 12 years, which is quite remarkable when you think about it.
Yeah, and you know, going back to Elias Diaz and what you said, you know, about him getting released, they asked him about that in the post game a presser, and yeah, he said it was more of motivation. It motivated him more. Of course, it's easy, I'm sure, to get down when you get released in the big leagues, right? But he said it was more of a motivation, and it was cool to see how much he lit up when somebody told him that he's just the second Venezolano to get that MVP in the All Star game. It's just him and Dave Concepcion, so that's pretty
Mm,
badass. It's a pretty badass
absolutely.
company to be in. That's a so yeah, it's a great story, and I think the funniest part of the whole thing was the fact that I don't know if you noticed, but at the very end when like you know it was Kimbrel versus Julio Rodriguez, they kept panning to Elias Diaz, and you could
Yeah, I
see he was
saw that
nervous.
in the dugout. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I felt for him, but as much as I wanted to see the American League win, I would have been the same way. Anytime you got
yeah.
a chance to win the MVP, you want to see that because I remember when I was 9 years old and I saw Paul Konerko go 2 for 2 in the
Hmm.
2002 All-Star game and have a big hit that gave the American League a one-run lead that game that ended tied and was the
Yeah.
reason why a lot of these All-Star games from 2003 to 2016 counted for home field advantage. I was like, damn, like Paul Konerko could have really been the first All-Star game MVP in White Sox history because the game ended in a tie because they used their benches up to know to wits end. We'll never know.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right, and I think like that actually made me think now, like what's the closest the Cubs? I mean, probably. I mean, Marlon Byrd had a great catch in 2012. No, I think he might have thrown somebody out to end the game or catch it, or I don't know. Maybe might have been the closest as well. That was in Anaheim, but also uh, Chris Bryant hitting a home run off Chris Sale
I remember that.
in 2016.
I remember that.
That may have been the closest that they've gotten, even though I think yeah, oh yeah, the NL lost that one, so that's probably why they didn't get it. But yeah, no, yeah, that's awesome, and I think anytime your team is you know, yeah, has a guy in the All-Star game in general, like, you know, vying for an MVP, that's awesome. But yeah, I can imagine that feeling, right? It's like you're so close to that. And you know, and you never know how many times you're gonna get back there, right? For any guys, that's their first time,
Absolutely.
right? And so
Especially
that,
in his case.
yeah, especially his case, his age, like, yeah, that's awesome. And you know, looking to be honest, man, not really too familiar with Elias Diaz before the game, before look because we haven't faced. I don't think the Cubs have faced the Rockies. Haven't really seen too many Rockies games this year. But you know, see, he's got 10 bombs. The guy's got pop. So you know, definitely showed up there, and that's a great story, man. But another thing too with the All Star game, kind of like the Home Run Derby. Kind of want to get your thoughts on this. Some people have been saying about the idea that maybe, hey, you know, change it to USA versus the world, or having, you know, some kind of thing like that. To be honest, for me, I'm cool with the format. I just want them to go back to the normal uniforms, their team uniforms. But that's whatever. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that'd be a good idea?
I'm with you on this one, Saul.
Hmm.
I'm with you all the way on this one. I prefer it being the American League versus the National League, and I would like to see them return back to the regular team uniforms as well, especially in today's times where you're trying to appeal to young fans, many of which may not even know these players. or maybe watching these players for the very first time on the All-Star stage every summer at the Midsummer Classic in July. So yeah, I have no issue with it. I understand having a Team USA versus World format, but in my eyes, I like it as is. Now, if you want to get creative and do it like the NBA does it, where you have the top two leading vote getters in the respective leagues draft, I think that would be great if you want to do that. But I like it. I like it the way it is. It's something special still about being able to represent your league and being able to team up with the guys in your league at least once a year.
Yeah, that's true. That I completely agree. And I know down the line, I'm sure, just like the pitch clock, just like everything else, I'm sure thing do something with it. And the thing, what I was thinking too, is that people were saying that, oh, we saw with the World Baseball Classic how cool it would be, with to have the nationality, this, and that. But then also kind of makes me think that that's probably what makes it so special. That it's not every year. That it's not, kind of like the way I say it with the World Cup, because the FIFA has considered doing the World Cup every 2 years. And I'm like, not to say it would, I would still watch it. I'd still be a fan, but for the casual fan, it might take a little bit away from it. And kind of the same thing I have to think of when it comes to the All-Star game, of putting that world versus USA, as cool as it would be for sure. It might be a little different because, it's you have it be every few years is what makes it special. So, in general, but yeah, no, it was cool to see the NL get the win there. And of course, like I said, cool to see a Chicago guy, get a nice, clean inning. And, wish could have seen more. Of course, as Swanson and Stroman didn't play, but it didn't work out there. But on other guys that played in it, that was cool to see have some success. Of course, Brent Rooker had a double there late in the game. And it was cool to see, of course, Adolis Garcia and Randy Rosarena, who, of course, are like best friends. They
Man,
made some great catches to start the game.
yes, they did.
Yeah, and it was funny. It was fun to see Freddie Freeman, of course, who got robbed by Rosarena, who was like, "Man, you can't get hits and steal them too." So
Yeah,
that I
I
thought,
heard them mic'd up.
yeah. So that was funny. That was funny, and yeah, it's just all fun, and you love to see that. I mean, you also had I saw Orlando Arcia like talking smack to Rosarena when he slid into second base, and they got him out. So yeah, it was also the first All-Star game with multiple caught stealing since 2008. I saw that, and
Oh,
that's
wow.
yeah, that was a cool fact, because you would think more guys would try to steal, right? In the All-Star game, just because the game doesn't matter, stuff like that, and see, trying to pull it off. But man, also don't run on Sean Murphy. You know what I mean? Also another thing too, and so all these guys are just, I mean, all the All-Star guys, but just particularly Sean Murphy got a cannon. So, but yeah, no, just another year, another great All-Star game, and hopefully, as they said in the news that maybe they're considering Chicago, considering Wrigley for 2025. Hopefully that comes to fruition. Um, I know, moving on to kind of some of the things that they were talking about during the All-Star break, during the All-Star game, during the All-Star festivities, was Ohtani talk, man. Of course, everyone was asking Ohtani, where he's gonna go, where he thinks he's gonna go, all this stuff, and he played pretty coy anyways on it, and all that stuff, and playing it smart, of course. But I thought it was just the Ohtani questions that other players get, I thought are hilarious. Like Mookie Betts was getting interviewed, and during his presser, they asked him, they were like, "Have you talked to Ohtani?" And he's like, "No, I haven't had time. Plus, got a lot of press around him." And then the I think she was a Japanese reporter, but she was like, "Are you gonna try to talk to him?" It's just like these questions are just, it's just funny to me, because it's like all Otani like centered questions. It's just funny, but rightfully so. I mean, he's the best player in baseball. But from the recent talks, of course, it obviously, we've said it before. It doesn't look like the Angels want to trade him, and I mean, Artie Moreno has said as well that he's kind of alluded to the fact that he doesn't want to trade him. He doesn't want to be the guy to do that. But what have you made from these rumors that have come out as well? That I believe it was John Heyman, I think, that might have said, or Buster Olney, that the Yankees might be a spot that he has heard that if he does get traded, he would go there, or even like a Rangers or even a Rays. Actually, he mentioned as well. But what do you make about those rumors and stuff like that? That if Ohtani would go, and do you think ultimately, as we stand right here on July 13th, that he's going to stay put?
Well, to address the the state of the media want to ask Ohtani questions
Mm-hmm.
throughout the All-Star festivities. That's a tradition unlike any other. You know, anytime you a free
Mm-hmm.
agent and you a hot shot, big time player in the manner in which Shohei Ohtani is, you're gonna get a lot of those. We know that firsthand just based off what happened a year ago out in Los Angeles when Juan Soto was a member of the Washington Nationals. And people were like, well, hey, why aren't you signing the contract extension to become one of the highest paid players with the Nationals? And you had Scott Boras basically step in front of Juan Soto and say, look, we're not talking about that at this time.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for what's happening. Just stay tuned. In Shohei's case, he didn't have that, but those questions are going to happen. I mean, you know, those questions happened in 2021 when Chris Bryant was representing the Chicago Cubs for the last time in the All-Star game, and he had to deal with it from Joe Buck in the middle of the game while he was playing. So that always happens. Now, in regards to Shohei Ohtani getting dealt, I don't see the Angels wanting to move him. I don't. But you're 7 games back in the American League West division where you got a 2-team race brewing between the Rangers and the Astros. The Mariners don't appear to be going anywhere. I believe the Angels are also like several games back in the wild card standings. Mike Trout is out indefinitely with a hamate bone issue, you know, having to get surgery on that. Anthony Rendon is out. Your farm system is depleted. I understand that you tried to make this run in an effort to get to the playoffs for the first time with Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani through the 4.5 years they've been together or whatever. If you wasn't able to do it then, I don't think you're going to be able to do it now. And when you have a depleted farm system in the fashion in which the Angels have, you're going to have to make a move. And you could get a ton back for Shohei Ohtani. I know it's hard. I wouldn't want to trade Shohei Ohtani either, but they are currently in the All-Star break right now, getting set to go into the second half of the season, but yet they've lost 9 out of their last 10 games. If it's me, you got to trade them. Do I see Tampa Bay getting Shohei Ohtani? I mean, they could. They have the prospects to offer, but I think that's an enormous gamble that's just too hard for a team like the Rays to take, especially when you know you're only getting them to rent them. Because what are the odds of the Tampa Bay Rays trying to pay Shohei Ohtani top dollar to stay there? So unless if you have like a concrete guarantee that you're going to, from the ownership group, if you're the front office of the Rays, that you're going to be able to resign this man, that makes no sense. Rangers, I could see the Rangers maybe won them. I could see the Yankees definitely won them in the wake of the Aaron Judge injury and so forth with the way that offense has been. But one team we can't count out is the Los Angeles Dodgers. This team did not make too many moves in the offseason, and I think it was for a reason. They have the prospect capital to do it. That's the team that would make the most ideal sense to trade them to, because why would you want to trade them to a team in the American League, let alone a team in your division, the Texas Rangers, when you could trade them to the LA Dodgers and he don't even have to move that far to go play at Chavez Ravine. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, you're right. You made some good points. And I think with the Rays, I think if they were to get him, I think it would really just be just to kind of get their first World Series, ever,
absolutely.
right? That's really just, I think that's just, and I think, and you can make an argument, right? I mean, maybe not even my argument, it'd just be the truth that it would be worth it, right? No matter what they give up, if they get that World Series, boom, he leaves. At least he got, they got the World Series, and that's it, right? Could you? I mean, right? I think so, right? I feel like
it's a gamble, but like we always say, Saul, man, ain't no guarantees.
No, yeah.
But you're right though. Scare money, it doesn't make any money.
Yeah.
And it would be an all-in move. We putting all our chips in on the table to get Shohei Ohtani, but man, like if I'm a Tampa Bay Rays fan, you really raising the stakes making a move like that, because the Rays got a way of doing things. And the Rays way, for the most part, has led to success. It just hasn't culminated in a World Series championship. But if they did do that move, that would be a big move. And I know it would be a lot of mad fans in New York, in
Mm-hmm.
Boston, and in Baltimore and Toronto that have to worry about a Shohei Ohtani in Tampa Bay with Randy Arozarena and Yandy
Mm-hmm.
Diaz and them boys.
Yeah, no, I just think it. Yeah, you're right. I think I think it would just be cool because we'll never see a team like the Rays sign Ohtani, right? So I think it'd be cool just to have a little blip of like 2 months of Ohtani with like the Rays. That like 20 years from now, people are gonna be like, he played for the Rays, and you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be kind of
Yeah, I get
goofy.
what you're saying because you know
Yeah,
that would be
yeah,
like when we was kids coming up. I never forget Randy Johnson
yeah.
got traded from Seattle to
Mm-hmm.
Houston for a
Mm-hmm.
brief moment.
Yeah.
And I had forgot about that to the pandemic when somebody was posting Randy Johnson Astros highlights. I was like,
Mm.
wow, I forgot he did play with the Astros way with the Arizona.
Yeah, and even then, I feel like people don't think about the fact that he was on the Devil Rays, right? Like, I feel like people don't talk about that enough either.
Mm-hmm.
And he won a Cy Young, I believe, there. So, like, I think, it was cool. It's cool to see that type of stuff happen. I think, if that does happen, but you are right, and you can't forget the Dodgers, and I mean, the Dodgers are already making noise on some other talks, of course. But another thing I do want to talk about is the fact that the Cardinals have, their GM has basically said it. They're selling. I think that he was quoted on saying, we're going to trade some people. And he didn't say, obviously, he's not going to say who, but overall, who do you think would be on the move? A lot of people are saying Arenado is going to be in the move, Goldschmidt, but I'm like, man, I don't know. Some of these deals they got, I don't know who would take that type of money. And I don't know if that even be smart to begin with, but they're looking like it sounds like anybody's available with them. And I think a guy like Arenado is primed to be on the move somewhere. He just seems like the most likely of the big pieces. But if not, I think a guy like Flaherty easily movable. A guy maybe even like Hicks is movable. But in your opinion, who would you see from the Cardinals, getting traded this upcoming deadline?
Well, you named public target number one, and that's Jack Flaherty. You know, with the resurgence that he's had this season in St. Louis, we know that this is a seller's market and that pitching, if you make it available to these teams, you can get a premium deal. And Jack Flaherty is one of those guys that I definitely see being on the move. Another guy that I could see being on the move is a Nolan Gorman.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about how there's some teams out there, such as the Houston Astros, with an injured Yordan Alvarez who's set to undergo his rehab assignment within the coming days. They need a left-handed bat with some pop. Nolan Gorman can provide that for you. A guy like Tommy Edman, I could see being available to teams that are in need of a second baseman or a guy that could just be thrown around anywhere in the infield. He's another player that I could see being available as well as Jordan Hicks. To me, those are the top four guys. I don't see them trading Goldschmidt. I don't see them trading Arenado, but I do see those guys being moved. And I'm glad to see that St. Louis has finally come to their senses because this is a franchise that we don't typically see in this situation. But the reason why I think they're in this situation is kind of similar to the reason why you're finding a team in our city that we're going to get into in a bit in a similar scenario. And that's because they didn't spend the money that was necessary in order to acquire star talent to fill the voids and positions that they needed to where they had dire weaknesses at.
Yeah, no, I think, talking about some of the guys that are available, there was a reporter, I'm blanking on his name, but I saw on a podcast and they were talking about how Lars Nootbaar is, the guy that a lot of people have hit up the Cardinals for, not necessarily saying that he is available, but that's a lot of guys one of the guys that people have been contacting them about. But yeah, you're right. I think it's one of those things where they know they have an elite offense, but their pitching is the problem, right? And they know that they have to make a move because they know that they're a historic franchise with rich history of winning. And for them, they haven't had a World Series in 12 years. Not calling them the Yankees whatsoever, but they obviously have 10 plus championships, so they know how to win. So yeah, it's gonna be a fascinating story to follow because there's been I don't think this is possible. But there have even been some fans I've seen on social media talk about how like Arenado would be a great fit in Cubby Blue, and I'm like, you really think the Cardinals are going to trade Arenado to the Cubs to help their in division. I don't see that. So yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where, upcoming deadline, there's a lot of guys that, the Cubs could get. And I don't think Arenado is one of them. I don't even think offense is the problem, but we'll kind of talk about more to, get in there. But you want to add something else?
Yeah, like and you got to think about this too, man. This NL
Mm-hmm.
Central, like Cincinnati coming, and they're gonna be
Oh yeah.
around.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you an organization like the Cardinals, who's been so successful for 20 years doing it the way that you prided yourself on doing it, and that's scouting well, that's drafting well, and that's
Mm-hmm.
developing well. Sometimes you get cocky
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like you could just continue to find success doing it your way. That's not the case anymore. And then when you consider the prospects that they once had in their organization, who we all saw on center stage this week at All-Star, such as Randy Arozarena, Adolis Garcia, Zach Gallen, who was I believe a second-round draft pick of
Mm-hmm.
St. Louis, who started on behalf of the Arizona Diamondbacks, representing the National League. Like, man, you got to get something back. You have to get something back. But they do have some talent. I think the guys that are untouchable, though, for sure, are Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, and Jordan Walker. To
Mm-hmm.
me, those are the guys that, no matter what, they're safe.
Yeah, I agree. I think you could even. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, but I think a guy you could easily add to that list is Ryan Helsley. I think the fact that I don't know if they
That's true.
necessarily want to trade him, but I don't know. We'll see. But one other thing too, I wanted to move before we move on. There has been word, there's been some rumors as well that the Dodgers are interested in Lucas Giolito, and which would be honestly a great fit because he of course is from California.
Mm-hmm.
And he grew up rooting for the Dodgers. I've seen podcasts where he talks about, how he'd love to play, love to pitch at Dodger Stadium, hasn't gotten the chance to do yet, hasn't had a chance to do it yet. So him to do it in Dodger blue to go crazy. But of course, this is something that's close to you as a White Sox fan. What are your thoughts overall on the Dodgers' interest? As of course, you've been very adamant at the fact that the Sox have a chance in this weak division, right? So maybe selling isn't the right move. But in your opinion, if they did decide to move Giolito, what type of package would you expect from a guy like that? I think I might have actually saw one of your tweets talking about how, maybe even with that was with the Orioles, I think actually
Yep.
you were tweeting about the
Mm-hmm.
Orioles, right? But for the Dodgers in particular, I think I actually have some of my friends that are Sox fans as well have talked about how maybe they could package him with the Tim Anderson and get a little more, something like that in particular. But what are your thoughts on the overall situation there?
Well, it's going to be unfortunate, but you got to understand, that this is a business. I still think that it's a chance because you have to. Anytime you
Mm-hmm.
less than 10 games back, you never know. But when I look at the situation with Lucas Giolito and I look at the state of this team right now, I understand why the White Sox would want to move him. I totally get it. And moving him to the Dodgers would not be the worst place in the world to move him to. And I tell you why, because they have over several prospects that are ranked in the top 100 according to MLB's pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a team who has needs that they need to fill at positions that are key to the defensive element of the ball club, such as catching, Dodgers can supply you with that. It's a guy in their farm system by the name of Dalton Rushing, who I'm pretty sure a lot of White Sox fans have had their eyes on. He's a guy that's estimated to make his debut in the show come 2025, 22 years old, left-handed bat, provides a lot of power. That's something that this ball club needs. And they need a catcher with a strong defensive presence. And I believe Rushing could be a guy that provides that. I think he would be the main headline of any deal that you seek to do with the Los Angeles Dodgers involving Lucas Giolito. I would not try, on the other hand, though, to package Lucas Giolito with Tim Anderson. And I'll tell you why. Tim Anderson, as many people know, is very underpaid among the top shortstops in the game. And even though he's had a lackluster season, a season that's arguably been the worst year of his career, why would you trade him at a time where his value's at the absolute lowest? When you have a team option that you can use in the offseason for 14 million and allow him to build his value back up. I understand that you have Colson Montgomery, who, as of the moment, is the top prospect in the White Sox organization that you expect to supplant him as shortstop within the next couple of years. You just drafted Jacob Gonzalez out of Ole Miss, 15th overall. Let Tim Anderson build his value back up and then seek to assess the situation based on where the state of your team is come this time next year in 2024. You know, and maybe, just maybe, if he bounces back enough to where he is back to all-star form, you could get way more for him if you want to trade him then, or you can seek to sign him to an extension and have discussions with him about possibly moving to second base if you still value his bat well enough to be a part of your lineup for at least the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think anything, that would help the White Sox future is something that they should consider for sure. I think the only reason why somebody would want to do that, I think that reason of him having his value be so low is probably the only reason you'd want to package him up with somebody else, because of the fact that his value is low and that he's having a bad year. But no, yeah, I see where you're coming from, because I think that, I don't think that Tim Anderson is this player. I mean, he's 30 years old. He's having a bad year, and we've seen plenty of guys in the last 3 years have terrible years, then come back and, have great years. So I don't see why a guy like Tim Anderson, who hits the ball hard, is going to come back next year and have a terrible year just like this year, or even worse. I think next year, he'll come back and be stronger than ever. So I don't see why not the Sox wouldn't do that. It just looks like, maybe, they might want to be off with any player, or they want to get rid of certain players because of their age or something like that. But you have something else to add?
Yeah, man. Like, plus I understand the talk about the LA Dodgers because they can also give up pitching that they have down in their farm system.
Mm-hmm.
That could be enticing to a White Sox ball club that's in dire need of depth in the pitching department, such as a guy like Ryan Pepio or a guy like Gavin Stone, because you want to get at least 2 solid prospects from the Dodgers organization in exchange for Lucas Giolito. If you could get 3, that's even better. But I would assume that they would want to get Dalton Rushing. And the reason why Dalton Rushing would be the centerpiece is, like I said, Sox need catching. And then he's blocked, because if you look at the Dodgers organization right now, they have Will Smith, who is a hell of a catcher and has provided them with an incredible bat thus far throughout his time in LA. In the mix, he's blocked by guys like that. So, and then their top prospect is Diego Cartaya, who's
Mm-hmm.
also a catcher. So when you consider all of that, like, at some point they're gonna have to trade somebody for an arm,
Mm-hmm.
and the Dodgers would make sense. But one team we cannot count out is the Baltimore Orioles, man.
Yep.
We can't count them out. This is a team that me and you have talked about off the record many times, has a lot of prospects that have been making their major league debuts. All these guys are not going to be able to stick in the show with Baltimore. Somebody got to get dealt.
Mm-hmm.
Why not be able to find a package with Baltimore where you could get a Heston Jerstad and maybe a Grayson Rodriguez for Lucas Giolito? We'll see.
Yeah, no, that would be a hell of a return for Giolito. I'm sure White Sox fans would love to see that. So, they're pretty. I've seen plenty of things about how interested the Dodgers are. So we'll see where it goes, because it might be a battle between multiple teams. Because realistically, you look at some of the guys that are available, not counting Shohei, right, as the pitcher, because obviously he'd be the best pitcher available at the deadline. But no, Giolito might be the best available pitcher when it's all said and done at the trade deadline. Well, we'll see for sure. On the other side, just a couple of thoughts on the Cubs. I think ultimately the way they're playing right now, 42 and 47, I don't necessarily think that they could say they're buyers or sellers right now, as of right now. But they could easily go out there, win, 5 of the next 6 games and then officially count themselves as winners. But it's gonna be dicey and it's gonna come down to the wire because we've said it before. Ricketts is down to buy, but Jed Hoyer looks like he's not ready to say they are ready to buy. So I don't know. They're kind of confusing, honestly, of what they want to do, but hopefully everything goes well because they're a team that realistically, and like I said, we've said it before with this team, is that they're really only a few pieces from being like from being up there with the NL and winning that division, right? In the sense of they have the pitching, especially going to postseason series. They get with Hendricks, Stroman, and Steele, and then you have a lineup that with Swanson, Morel, and Bellinger, of course. That's another guy people that keep talking about that they could easily get back in this thing and they could easily make some noise if they fill those holes of a bullpen guys of multiple bullpen guys. People have been saying maybe a Matt Chapman, but even then it's like I don't see that because for multiple reasons. I don't see the Blue Jays dealing him. I don't see the Cubs giving up a lot for Chapman unless they want to re-sign him for sure, which again, that's also I don't think it's going to happen. So ultimately, I think they're just going to add some bullpen guys, some low key bullpen guys because it's a very Cubs thing to do. And I'd be okay with that, because ultimately that's their main problem. Their offense has shown great signs of life, especially when Bellinger's in there. And I understand that a lot of people still think that Stroman's going to get dealt. I don't see that. I see like a lot of people see that more likely than Shohei getting dealt. I don't know. I think ultimately Shohei stays and I think Stroman stays just because I think those guys want to sign. They want to sign those guys. Not to say the Angels are going to do that. I don't think the Angels are going to sign Shohei, but I think a guy like Stroman wants to be here so bad that they're going to see that and they're going to be willing to work with him, especially in the offseason, because I think he's going to hit free agency most likely. But we'll see what happens. I mean, this is a tale of two cities that, excuse me, a city of two with two teams that are kind of in the mix and kind of have 1 foot out, 1 foot in. So it's going to be really, really crazy to see how this trade deadline unfolds here in Chicago. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was was there a team? Is there a particular team? And I'll go first, but is there a team for you that you think will either falter in the second half or will take off, and people don't expect it. For example, for me, I think a lot of things or um a lot of people have been talking about the Rangers so highly, but they haven't, looked at their latest stretch of ball games that they haven't played really well. And they're 2 games ahead of the Astros, but they also have a lot of holes. I know they got Chapman, but they still need a little more pitching, whether it be a starting rotation arm or a bullpen arm. And I don't understand. I don't necessarily think also that their offense, being plus 148 run differential, will last for a whole year. They have some great pieces. They're off. Obviously, they had 6 starters in the All-Star game, but to last in that in a division that's very competitive. I mean, look, say what you want, but the Mariners still a competitive team. The Angels are still a competitive team, regardless of whether they deal him or not. I mean, you got Trout when he comes back, whatever. But Oakland as well, they're bringing up young guns. They brought up 2 of their top 10 prospects. I believe two of their top 5 prospects are coming up this week. So they're going to be competitive to end the season as well. So it's not going to be easy division, let alone in the AL in general. So I don't think it's going to be easy road whatsoever. And when it comes to that wild card race in the AL, because you brought it up a little bit with Angels, they're 5 games back. But you look at that race, and you can make an argument that the 3 teams that are at the top are probably going to be the 3 teams that end the season there, and that's Baltimore, Toronto, and Houston. And the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Mariners sit outside of that. But those are 3 teams that I could easily see in the playoffs. They have the right talent, especially with the Orioles, right? Who still have a shot at winning the division, of course. But I don't see the Blue Jays winning that. So yeah, we'll see when it comes to there. I'm not rooting for the Rangers to falter there, but I think it's one of those things where it easily could happen. I think another team that again could falter if they don't make any moves, which I think they are going to make moves. I think would be the Reds. I think if they don't make any moves, that young talent might falter a little bit because they haven't played a full season in the big leagues, like a guy like McLean or whatnot. But Ellie De La Cruz is, of course, great to see. But we'll see. And I think you mentioned on the show before that end this at the end of the month when they play the Cubs is going to say a lot about this division. I think if the Reds go into Wrigley, sweep the Cubs, or win 3 out of 4, I mean, that could be the nail in the coffin for the Cubs. You can make a good argument there, but we'll see where things go from there. But those are a couple teams that I think have to make a couple more moves at the deadline to kind of solidify their spot in this postseason picture. What about you?
You know, you made a great point on Cincinnati.
Mhm,
And that's a team that I think could easily be in the Lucas Giolito sweepstakes because I pay
mhm,
attention to farm systems, and
yeah,
the Reds have a very loaded farm system. For
mhm,
everybody that's come up, they got some guys like Noel V. Marte and a few other guys like Encarnacion Strand that they coming. And they're gonna be real solid force to be reckoned with the next several years. But they do need to make a move, and acquiring veteran pitching could be very helpful to them in their chase to obtain the NL Central championship. But teams that I could see faltering, I gotta say it. I'm kind of concerned about Tampa Bay a little bit.
mhm,
Tampa Bay went into this All-Star break in a rough funk. They had lost about 7 in a row, and they lost 7 out of their last 10 games. And when you got a Baltimore Orioles squad that has not gotten swept in any series this season, only 2 games back, in spite of getting off to a red hot start the way that Tampa Bay did, I feel like Baltimore's coming.
mhm.
I feel like this is Baltimore's division to lose, and that's a team I could see rising up. The Rays, I believe they're going to be there no matter what, but they may not be there in the manner in which we thought. And as a result, they might be one of those teams that have to rely upon a wild card berth in order to get into the dance in the postseason come October. Another team that I could see probably faltering, you bring up Texas. Yeah, I could see that as well, man, because that AL West is tough. And Seattle looks like a team that is going to make this race exciting. I don't know if they find a way to get one of those 3 wild card spots, but if they can play solid ball and continue to build off the momentum that they built prior to going into the All-Star break, winning 7 out of their last 10, they could get real hot fast and make this AL West a 3-team race. But I see Houston picking up. I see Baltimore picking up. Teams that I see faltering in the American League, I would probably say the Rangers, the Rays, and the Twins in that order. In the National League, a team like Philly, you can't count them out, especially after what they did last year. They seem like they're clicking at the right time, even though they're 12 games back in the NL East. Got a lot of people saying that the Mets will make a run. If it's any team I could see making that run in the East, it would be Philadelphia,
Mhm.
especially against a Miami Marlins team. As exciting and as fun to watch as they are with a young nucleus and an ace, and a future ace in Yuri Perez besides Sandy Alcantara. Unless they make a move or two, I don't know how they stay within the thick of that race. I look at the Central, yeah, the Reds, that's a team that could falter. In the West, man, I think we got a good 3-team race brewing with the Dodgers, the D-backs, and the Giants. And
Mhm.
that's going to be a bloodbath to the final week of the regular season. I don't know which team falters in the West, but I think Arizona is here to stay. And I think they just getting started too. And baseball right now is in a good place. You got to infuse young squads that are making some noise in both leagues that are not afraid to show and prove to some of these veteran-laden ball clubs.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think you made a good point when it comes to the West. I think the same thing about like the East with the Rays, as you mentioned them as well, that those divisions are just so stacked that you could easily see a team fall out of it because of the competition in their divisions. Yeah, and with the West in particular, I mean, you got 4 teams that could make the playoffs right there with the Padres, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, and the Dodgers. The Padres are down now, but I don't expect them to stay down. I think that if they do see themselves as a seller and they do trade off like a Soto, that's one thing. But that's I don't know. They have a great team. I think that they just kind of we look at their run differential right now. They have the second best run differential in that division. I think that says something, especially of their offense there. So we'll see what's going to happen. I think the Rays for sure, are going to get some a lot of pressure from the Orioles. Might be the only one. I don't really see the Blue Jays necessarily competing for that division, but who knows if they make a move or something like that. As you said, that they could easily be in there. Uh, But yeah, with the West, I think will be a little bit more of a closer watch just because of the fact that the Giants surprising a lot of people, man. I think that a couple of years ago, a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's a cute story, whatever," but now it's serious, and they have a lot of the guys from that same run, and they're doing it again, and they're putting together a good season. I mean, the same with the Marlins. I think might continue to go up, just because their pitching is so good. They're Luis Arraez, as you said in the All-Star game, he's an automatic hit every night. So yeah, it is a fun time in baseball, and these races are gonna come down to the wire. And I think that's the best part, and especially even some of these central races because the Brewers, if they're interested in making a move, they could easily make a move and get better. I mean, Yelich is playing a lot better. It's a team I think that gets lost in the rubble there because a lot of people talking about the Reds and how good they're playing with Ellie. Will the Cubs sell or buy? And nobody talks about the Brewers, but they're definitely going to be buyers. They're going to buy something for sure, and because they know that they could win this division. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up for this edition of the At Bat Podcast. We talked all things All-Star game, All-Star festivities, as well as some trade deadline coming up because the deadline will be here sooner rather than later. But yeah, check out all the stuff that we have for War Media. Of course, Gabe Wilkins on Open Run, as well as all our articles on Substack. Of course, Anthony Pisana released his review on Dead Reckoning, the latest Mission Impossible movie, and of course, we have a new show that covers combat sports. WWE, MMA, all that type of stuff. With Slam Society with Will Resendez and Josh Wright. So check that out, of course. And of course, Miles Porter couldn't be with us this week, so we'll have him on again next week. Hope you enjoyed this latest edition of the At Bat Podcast. For Saul Rodriguez, Gabe Wilkins, everyone have a great week.